What's good, everyone? Welcome back for another showcase and session. Today we're going to have a little bit of fun and really just test out some terrible units, and they are severely outdated, and honestly they have no positioning in terms of being placed on any current teams. And obviously we have a lot more better options now, considering they've really built on this whole great Saiyaman setup with the different units and combination of 1 and 2 and whatnot. But the two units here that I'm showcasing today are probably the bottom feeders out of all the options you have. Now, it's debatable. There might be one or two of lesser rarities that are a little bit worse off than this, but yeah, unless there's like some sort of awakening and a potential EZA or whatever, these guys aren't ever going to be relevant on a team, to be honest with you. And the simple fact of rainbowing these units are probably worthless too at this point, unless you're like myself, where it's more or less just a collector's item and trying to complete the set, so to speak. So otherwise I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but let's just talk about the skill sets and try and provide some sort of saving grace as to why you might want to potentially work on these units. So we'll start off with the Gohan unit, or Great Saiyaman Super Agility type. This does awaken from the Team Gohan unit that starts off as the SR rarity. In terms of like the leader skill, it's Agility, Tech, Strength type, attack increase of 30%. For the super attack, just simply causes huge damage, but also greatly lowers attack. So that does provide some benefit, and I did think about honestly going a little bit more heavier toward additional attack than crits for this unit when I was thinking about the potential system. But after careful consideration, either way, I'm not going to be using this unit on a whole lot of setups. So I was like, let me just throw in the crit levels instead of going with the level 12. So that's pretty much the insight with that. In terms of passive skill, it's attack increase of 2500 when HP is 50% or above. So again, it's a flat rate number of 2,500. It's not a percentage base, so you're really not. It's really insignificant, probably from a calculation standpoint. I don't know the, underlying calcs for it, but I would imagine it's immaterial for the 2,500 extra toward attack. Let's just move on to the Great Saiyaman 2, aka Videl. I did bring in the tech unit over the strength version because the passive skill is a little bit more beneficial with the tech versus the strength type. So just from a breakdown standpoint, this unit, leader skill is a tech and strength type, key +2. Super attack will cause huge damage to enemy and greatly lowers defense. As you saw, I went a little bit heavier toward additionals for this chick, just to take advantage of the greatly lowering defense option. From a passive skill standpoint, it's agility and intelligence type enemy attack reduced by 25%. So of course, in instances where you are able to lower enemies' defense, this is somewhat beneficial to have. Not that you necessarily need to run this unit on any significant team or whatnot, but it is a nice little addition to have that could potentially provide somewhat of a benefit for maybe newer players and whatnot. And honestly, the strength type is even worse. I mean, it's all types attack +1000. Now, if it was like 15%, I could somewhat, potentially think about using that one over the tech version. But at the end of the day, these units, I mean, they came out a long time ago, and unless they go from level 100 to a TUR level 120 and a potential EZA, I mean, these guys really just don't have any reason to be ran on any sort of team, and I doubt people are even looking into grinding for these units because you do have to, go through a little bit of a process in terms of awakening them. Now, I think it's a little bit easier now than it used to be. So, if you're thinking about doing the awakening process now, it might be somewhat, worthwhile your time, especially if you're a collector, so to speak. But outside of that, it's really a waste of time. I mean, to give you a fair perspective, I mean, I did include the new free-to-play strength type Great Saiyaman 1 and 2, or Videl, or whatever the name label was, but when you see that unit on a floater position in the rotation with the other two units, I mean, it's just night and day how much more worse the other two units are in comparison to, let's say a new free-to-play unit introduced to the game. So it really does tell you, how some of these units were essentially just lost in time, and they never really just kind of came back to light in terms of, you know, improvements or whatever the case is. So yeah, I mean, if they go back in and potentially, you know, give them a supreme damage multiplier for the super attack and, you know, update the passive skill a little bit, they would be somewhat more relevant. But I kind of have a hard time thinking they would actually go into the process of doing that, considering we have so many other, you know, great Saiyaman variations of units now. Now, in the past, it was a little bit light. You know, there weren't that many, so of course, these two units could have potentially been used back then, but you know, I mean, there are better units, like, you know, the Baba Shop Gray Saiyaman's obviously better than this version on here as well, and, you know, a couple of others that are much better than these two units combined. So yeah, it's a lost cause in my opinion, in terms of like using these guys. But yeah, I mean, it really does put it in perspective, because I did include clips of a couple things. So one, I did include Infinite Dragon Ball History event runs. I kind of wanted to really just put, you know, the pedal to the metal in terms of making sure I'm testing these guys in a more current setting, to where, you know, they are getting hit very hard, and you'll see that certain rotations I did have to use, you know, the Icarus item to reduce the damage taken. Number two, I did include clips in the second half of the video where there are a lot more of the, you know, Gray Saiyaman variation units, so it kind of puts it in perspective in terms of not only how they would link up, but how much better the other units are in comparison to the two being highlighted here. So, you know, I did want to combine a couple of different variables and components into one for this showcase to really do it as much justice as I could, in terms of like not necessarily showing how terrible these units are, but just, you know, testing them in a more appropriate fashion than, let's say, Boss Rush or, you know, something like that. So, you know, it really does kind of put it in perspective in terms of how terrible some of these units are. But, you know, I mean, rainbowing units is not nearly as bad as going through the process of link leveling the units. You know, it takes a lot more work to link level each of the individual link skills and, you know, complete the set of all 10s and, you know, go through there. Otherwise, just simply rainbowing a unit, I mean, it takes maybe, you know, 10 minutes to go through all the nodes or whatever. So it's a much more simpler process. But yeah, I eventually do plan on max leveling links for these guys. I just don't know when exactly I'm going to be motivated enough to do it. You know, I've got quite a few others that I have in mind that I want to run through first before I even think about going through the link leveling process for these guys. But eventually I will. And, you know, I initially thought about doing a full Great Saiyaman team showcase, but honestly, I think this kind of fits it better, because I wanted to pinpoint just these two units instead of doing a full team on it, because to be honest with you, I would include other units instead of these guys, because, you know, they're obsolete. They're not going to be able to keep up. Like the Int Great Saiyaman here that recently got an easy A. I mean, it's hitting for 2 million plus in attack stats, and defense is obviously way better than the other units. So again, to my point of you know, really just putting into perspective how old these units are, for lack of better words, you know, I did want to include the other units to just highlight that component of it. But, you know, it's a lot of fun just to test them out, you know, test out old obscure units and just see how they perform on some of the newer events, and just, you know, seeing if they hold up to some degree. I would highly advise against you rainbowing these units, let alone link leveling, until you're doing, unless you're doing it for, you know, the memes, so to speak. You know, unless you're just having fun and just doing it to have fun, literally, I would not recommend you do that. So, you know, we'll leave things at that. But I don't know. I really don't see this happening in terms of these guys getting a Dokkan Awakening and a potential EZA. They're, you know, maybe a couple years ago, before like all these other newer versions of these guys came out, I would have said possibly. But the fact that we have so many other better options now, I don't think it's even worth it to, even from a developer standpoint, to consider it. You know, maybe at a dry period when there's no major celebrations and nothing to do, and it's centered around the current theme, possibly. But outside of that, I mean, I just don't simply think it's worth it, you know. But, you know, we never know until it actually happens. So I guess we'll have to we'll have to wait and see what and see what actually happens. But quite honestly, I don't see it happening. So this is one of those cases where I might go back in and do a level 10 showcase for these units, but outside of that, there's not much to do. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the 100% potential showcase of the great Saiyaman units. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.